Kevon with Dr. Flu. Just going to go over the process of removing a steel firebox and replacement with masonry. So we start out by blocking up the vents, typically with tape. Some vents you'll have lower two and then an upper two. This particular one had a center. We actually called this a tubulator instead of a heatilator. Obviously setting up protection for your home. Looking up inside this heatilator, when they start to fail, we get rusting, areas where creosote can form behind the steel, and when they fail, it's got to be cut out and removed. So once the steel is taken out, we then are left with exposed masonry. And then you can see over here where my cursor is, where the flue lining, the existing clay flue lining is. When the steel is taken out, stretch this for you, you can see we've got this area here is where the fire is happening. So this set would actually be turned 180 degrees and mated up here with this portion here. This is the center of that area that would have been cut out from this between the two, and then we pull that steel out through the face. You can see the thickness of that back, same on the sides, and this bottom piece of the steel. After that's out, we then, if needed, are be removing flue tile, making sure that this area, which doesn't have a formed smoke chamber, you see just raw masonry, some insulation, all of that stuff gets removed. And then we're left with the open holes where the vents used to be. So those vents mated up with that old heatilator and allowed air circulation into that outer shell. And then the hot air in this particular case was coming out this center duct. In a lot of other cases we'll have two other side vents that the hot air is escaping out of this here. So those holes unfortunately are on the back side of this where we can't see them, but they're about here, and in most cases would also be here. Then for the restoration, we start by getting a lining system in place and forming a smoke chamber. And this is done in several steps throughout the day. But the first parge coat is applied with refractory mortar. Second, we start to fill in the old Heatilator vents from the back side. So the old vents that were secured here are still going to go back in place. They're non-functioning at that point, but it's solid filled with masonry behind that point. And we typically do that from the inside. Then we start laying in with our 2-inch thick fire brick and solid filling with masonry. You can see the mortar kind of poking up here. This entire box gets built by hand and then solid filled with masonry behind. Once the firebox is built up and the vents are closed, we then install the lining system or the damper. And the smoke chamber then is finish parge. So our original area that you saw in one of the first photos was up in this area. And then we blend that smoke chamber and form a new one so that it's a smooth, conducive to flow change from the firebox to the flue lining itself. The damper at that time will be left open, so with your chain up, because the new smoke chamber that was formed is wet masonry still, and we ask that this is typically left open for at least 48 hours so that the stainless steel handle does not get embedded in the newly formed smoke chamber as you see in this photo. So if we were to pull that tight, it would end up getting embedded in this and then cemented in place for life. If you've got any other questions, please reach out to us, but hopefully this gives you an idea of what's going to happen at the home.